Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're about to begin a brand new love journey. Please comment on where you're watching from so we can see that our Soul Stories family is all around the world. The glass doors of Meridian slid open, releasing a cool draft of air conditioning scented faintly with brown butter and thyme. Lila Carter paused for half a second under the neon lights reflecting on the downtown sidewalk, her hand instinctively brushing her wallet. Inside, a $5 bill tucked beneath an old library card, a few loose coins, and an unpaid utility bill. She swallowed hard. The blind date from Hinge had sounded fun at noon, but now, not so much. Inside Meridian, a trendy new American restaurant, packed during happy hour, warm Edison bulbs glowed overhead, a marble bar gleamed, and the bartender's shaker clinked rhythmically. An acoustic duo in the corner strummed a slow version of Stand By Me. Servers in black button-ups and canvas aprons glided across the hardwood floors in soft-soled shoes. The place was sleek, youthful, and expensive, very much in tune with urban America in 2025. Lila quickly typed, "I'm here" to Tyler. His Hinge profile picture showed a man in a crisp white shirt, smiling as if he were at a company offsite. His last message had said, "Meridian at 7. I'll take care of it." The phrase, "I'll take care of it," had been her only relief all afternoon. "Lila!" a male voice called. Tyler waved from a table against the exposed brick wall, dressed in a slim-fit navy shirt, a shiny steel watch catching the light, hair perfectly slicked back like he'd just left a boardroom. He stood to pull out her chair, textbook polite. "Hi." Lila smiled, sliding into the seat and tugging at her thrift store moss green dress. She caught him glance at her slightly worn flats before offering a practiced grin. "Traffic was brutal tonight," Tyler said, already sounding familiar. "I ordered a California Pinot. Hope that works for you." "Sure, thank you." Lila looked down at the menu. Caesar salad $16, buttermilk fried chicken $28, lobster roll $34. Her anxiety ticked up another notch. Back in her walk-up a few subway stops away, dinner usually meant boxed mac and cheese or ramen, followed by discount apples from Trader Joe's. Tyler launched into work talk. "I'm in biz dev for a SaaS that's in Series C. You know ARR, right? This year we're aiming for $40 million. He smiled like a pitch deck. "And you? What do you do?" "I juggle a few part-time jobs," Lila answered plainly. "Mornings at the coffee shop on the corner, afternoons babysitting for some families on the Upper West, nights taking the Google Project Management course on Coursera." "Babysitting?" Tyler tilted his head. "Cute. But you want to grow, right? In my circle, people usually look for someone on the same level." The way he emphasized same level made Lila force a polite smile. She let her eyes wander to escape the sting. Near the window, a man in a charcoal suit sat with a little girl about 5 years old. The girl's brown hair was tied in pigtails with white ribbons as she colored in a Unicorns and Friends book. The man leaned toward the waiter, his calm, measured presence radiating the ease of someone long used to board meetings and earnings calls. Tyler pushed his menu aside, decisive as if hitting submit. "I'll take the lobster roll and truffle fries, and you can have whatever. Splitting checks here is kind of a pain." "I got this," he looked at Lila. "What'll you have?" "I'll just do the Caesar and water." She didn't want to leave herself open to his "got this," followed by mockery later. Besides, the tip alone here would probably run 20%. "Healthy," Tyler smirked. "So, what's your 5-year plan?" "In New York City, everyone has one. I want a steady job, decent health insurance, a kitchen with a window, a bookshelf that doesn't warp from humidity." Lila laughed at how modest it sounded. "And a Saturday night dinner that doesn't depend on happy hour." "Adorable," Tyler said, in a tone that made it sound more like naive. The food arrived quickly. Tyler's lobster roll gleamed with butter, while her Caesar looked crisp and fresh with Parmesan. He rambled on about networking at WeWork, off-sites in Aspen, and Yacht Week. Just to try, nothing special. Lila offered the right uh-huhs and nodded on cue, keeping her eyes from drifting toward the leather check presenter resting at the edge of the table. When the waiter set the bill down, Tyler glanced at it, then shot up. "I need to take a quick call outside." His phone hadn't even buzzed. He slipped through the glass doors, disappearing into the night as smoothly as if on cue. 3 minutes. 10. 15. Lila finished her water, palms damp with sweat. She eased open the leather folder. The number inside made her stomach drop. Tax and tip pushed it sky high. She debated. Text Tyler? Ask the waiter to split? Try Apple Pay, but her account? No. She inhaled, raised her hand. Excuse me, she said softly. My friend got caught up. Can I just split my part? Of course, the waiter replied, unfailingly polite in that American service way. Let me double-check for you. Lila sat frozen. At the window table, the little girl with pigtails put down her crayon and whispered into her father's ear. Lila couldn't hear, but she caught the girl's eyes flicking toward her, an expression of childlike empathy, so tender it almost hurt because it was so real. Daddy, why does she look sad? The girl's voice floated faintly, just enough for Lila to guess the meaning. The man bent low to answer quietly. Lila turned away, her throat suddenly dry and tight. Tyler never came back. The waiter returned, holding the leather folder as if it carried a secret. Good news, he said with a genuine smile. Your check's taken care of. Sorry, Lila's head snapped up. By who? He gave the slightest glance toward the window table before resuming his neutral, professional expression. A gentleman over there just picked it up. He only said, passing by. Lila's cheeks flushed half relief, half pure American-style embarrassment. Here everyone knew independence mattered. Accepting help from a stranger meant owing a proper thank you. She stood grabbing her wallet, because in America people rarely leave a table without a wallet or phone, and walked toward the window table. Hi, she began, keeping her voice steady. I think you just treated my table. I wanted to thank you, and I can Venmo you back if... Hi! The man looked up. Up close, his jawline was clean, his eyes a deep brown, and he was handsome in a quiet way. No need. Some nights should end softer than they start. The little girl beside him burst in like sunshine. Hi, I'm Sophie. Do you like stickers? She held out a sparkling heart-shaped sticker. Lila smiled for real. I love stickers. Thank you. She pressed the sticker onto the corner of Sophie's coloring page. The man's voice was low, warm. I'm David. And really no Venmo. Just get home safe. It's a windy night. I will. Lila nodded, her chest tightening at the way Americans often use short, non-intrusive phrases of care. She turned to Sophie. Thanks for the sticker. Sophie tilted her head, serious as a tiny therapist. You look sad. Lollipops help. She dug into her little bag and handed over a strawberry lollipop wrapped in clear plastic. For you. Meridian seemed to soften by half a tone. Lila accepted it, laughing. This is perfect. In America, something small and sweet often soothed more effectively than any long speech. Good night, Lila, David said, asking nothing further. Her number, not her Instagram. Boundaries respected. Here, politeness meant knowing when to stop. Good night. Lila dipped her head, retreating, still remembering to toss a, have a good one, to the waiter on her way out. She pushed through the glass doors into the night, distant car horns, a lift pulling into the curbside lane, the wind carrying the smell of late-night pizza from the slice shop next to the theater. She pulled out her phone. The MTA app showed a bus heading to Queens, arriving in 9 minutes. Lila sat on the bench under a yellow streetlight. She opened Tyler's message. Sorry. Emergency. You got your part, right? She exhaled and blocked his number. Not as some act of being strong, but simply for her own mental health. She unwrapped the lollipop. Strawberry sweetness bloomed on her tongue, proof that things didn't need to be expensive to be good. A breeze teased her hair across her lips. Lila leaned back, thinking about the quietly paid bill, the nod of passing by, and the steady brown eyes of the man sitting with the little girl in pigtails. In a country that prized self-reliance, sometimes neighborliness came from complete strangers. Inside Meridian, David signed the merchant copy, adding a 22% tip, the kind of cultural standard almost everyone in the city followed. Sophie whispered, Daddy. Can we see the sticker lady again? David smiled, a rare expression for him. Maybe. New York is small in funny ways. He took her hand. Ready to head home? Can we get ice cream? Sophie bargained, her eyes bright like a miniature Times Square. Princesses don't just eat salad. David laughed outright. You're right. Princesses deserve ice cream. He slipped on his coat and opened the door. The night air carried the scent of rain on concrete, the kind of smell longtime New Yorkers could recognize even from a light drizzle. The bus pulled up. Lila swiped her MetroCard. She hadn't switched to Omni yet, out of habit, and settled near the window. She watched the stream of people along the sidewalks, bodegas glowing, nail salons pulling down their gates. The city was expensive, loud, sometimes indifferent, but here, among thick stacks of bills and fragile dreams, quiet kindness still slipped in like a porch light left on at night. She opened her group chat and typed, "Worst hinge date ever," but got a lollipop and a paid bill from a total stranger, plus his adorable kid. NYC is wild. Her friends dropped skull-face laughing. Lila smiled, pocketed her phone. The strawberry sweetness warmed her chest. A small seed, the child's question. The man's nod had taken root inside her. In America, people didn't believe in loud fate. They believed in small moments. And sometimes those moments were fate. On a Monday morning, Lila sat in her tiny kitchen with a cup of cheap coffee, just enough to keep her awake. On the table, unpaid bills piled high, threatening to swallow her whole. She unlocked her phone and scrolled through a babysitting app in search of a babysitting job. One listing caught her eye. Looking for a sitter for a 5-year-old girl, Monday through Friday, 4 to 8 p.m., $30 per hour. Lila blinked, her heart racing. $30 an hour for her? That number was a dream. Not only enough to cover rent and bills, but also something to save toward her long-time goal. Becoming a preschool teacher or opening a small learning corner for underprivileged kids. That was why she had been studying at night and working multiple jobs, hoping one day to stand in a room filled with children's laughter. She hit apply immediately, adding a short note. I love kids, have babysitting experience, can prepare light meals, tell stories, and help with arts and crafts. That afternoon, a notification popped up. Accepted. Please meet today at 3:30 at the school pickup. At 3:30, Lila stood at the preschool gate. Children burst out like little birds set free. A brown-haired girl with pigtails ran straight toward her, eyes shining. Miss Lila, she squealed. Lila froze. It was Sophie, the same little girl from the restaurant, the one who had given her the strawberry lollipop. Oh my gosh, Lila laughed, kneeling to hug her. It's you. I never would have guessed. Sophie giggled, pointing to her notebook with the heart sticker still on it. I told you, princesses don't just eat salad. Princesses eat ice cream too. I like you already. Lila's heart fluttered at the innocent words, warmth spreading through her chest. They walked together to the apartment. When the door opened, Lila nearly lost her breath. The home was spacious, bright, and so neat it looked like something out of a magazine. But what caught her attention most was Sophie's room, filled with books, paints, and toys. Lila brushed her fingers across the shelf and thought, if only I could create a warm little study corner like this for other kids too. Sophie tugged her hand eagerly. I'm hungry. I want apples cut like flowers. Of course, Lila said with a laugh, washing her hands and rolling up her sleeves. I'll turn apples into flowers for my little princess. Snack time was lively. Sophie ate while chattering about school, a classmate who stole crayons, another who fought over a chair. Lila listened closely, nodding and adding comments here and there that made Sophie burst into giggles. Around 6 o'clock, she helped Sophie with her bath. The little girl clutched a bright yellow rubber duck, splashing water everywhere, her laughter filling the bathroom. Sitting nearby, Lila watched her wet hair cling to her cheeks, and her heart ached with the reminder of her own dream. To one day see many little faces like this in a classroom of her own. At around 7 o'clock, the front door opened. David walked in, jacket loosened, tall frame casting a shadow across the kitchen. He stopped short when he saw Lila. Their eyes met. For a fleeting second, both remembered that awkward night at the restaurant. Hi, David said, his voice even, though a little stiff. Hi, Lila replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Sophie came running, throwing her arms around him. Daddy! Today I made a unicorn bookmark with Miss Lila. I really like her. David crouched, listening to his daughter's chatter, his gaze softening without him realizing it. He looked up at Lila and gave a small nod. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Lila smiled, her heart tightening with a feeling she couldn't quite name. Stepping into this home, caring for this little girl, she felt one step closer to her dream and at the same time, one step deeper into a world she never thought she'd belong to. David's apartment sat high above the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows letting the last light of day spill into the sprawling living room. Everything looked flawless. Sleek gray leather sofas, a spotless plush rug, bookshelves lined in perfect order, and a kitchen gleaming with stainless steel appliances. Soft, recessed lighting glowed from the ceiling. Tailored curtains hung just so, everything as pristine as though staged for a design magazine. But the longer Lila looked, the more she felt something missing. No crayon drawings taped to the walls, no lopsided pillows from being tossed around. The silence was so thick she could hear the low hum of the AC and her own footsteps on the polished floor. Sophie was different. The moment she kicked off her shoes, she darted into her playroom. Her laughter rang out, then vanished as the door clicked shut. In such a vast space, even a child's joy seemed swallowed whole. David stood at the edge of the kitchen, slipping off his blazer. His face was calm, his eyes guarded. He gave Lila a brief nod, speaking little. Snacks are in the cabinet. Sophie's bath and bedtime schedule is on the fridge. I saw it, Lila answered softly, trying to sound casual. He shut down his laptop, put on his headset, and within seconds he was immersed in work. His deep, steady voice wove through industry jargon as his fingers tapped relentlessly across the keyboard. He looked sharp, focused, and utterly unreachable. Lila exhaled quietly. The apartment seemed to mirror its owner, immaculate, controlled, and cold. To fill the silence, Lila pulled Sophie into an art project. She spread old newspaper over the kitchen island and brought out safety scissors, colored paper, glue, and a bag of cheap beads from the craft store down the block. What should my little princess make today? She asked with bright enthusiasm. Sophie propped her chin in her hand, then squealed, A crown! With so many shiny stars. Great idea. Let's get started. Together they snipped paper and glued beads, giggling when the glue stuck to Sophie's fingers. Miss Lila, my hands are stuck. You'll have to call the doctor. Oh no, better let Dr. Lila check, she said in mock seriousness, then blew softly on Sophie's hands. The little girl burst into peals of laughter, a sound that lit up the whole kitchen. At the dining table, David stayed in his meeting, but Sophie's laughter grew too loud to ignore. He glanced over. His daughter wore a paper crown, eyes sparkling, while the babysitter bent close, hair falling in soft waves as she cut and glued. The sight was a complete reversal of the usual sterile calm of his home. By evening, Leela asked, Sophie, how about some cookies? I know an easy recipe. Yes, chocolate chip. Sophie bounced on her toes. All right, but you have to be my assistant, deal? Deal. They rolled up their sleeves and raided the kitchen. Lila found flour, eggs, butter, sugar, and a full bag of chocolate chips. Suddenly, the cold kitchen transformed into a tiny bakery. Sophie stood on a stool, stirring with a spoon, flour smudging her cheeks while Lila laughed beside her. 1, 2, 3, pour, Lila called, and both giggled as flour puffed into the air like snow. Soon the smell of cookies drifted through the apartment, sweet, warm, pulling with it the kind of childhood memories this place hadn't seen in years. David ended his call and slipped off his headset. He stopped at the doorway, arms folded, taking in the scene, his daughter grinning, face dusted white, while Lila gently brushed flour from her hair. The golden kitchen light wrapped around them like a halo. Something hot stirred in his chest. It had been so long since he'd heard Sophie laugh this hard. Since his wife passed away, laughter had faded, replaced by the noise of TV and the sound of keystrokes. He thought keeping things orderly was enough, but now he realized what he'd lost. Simple joy. When the cookies came out, Sophie squealed, Daddy, try one. Miss Lila and I made them. David walked over, taking a warm cookie. The sweetness melted on his tongue, crisp at the edges, soft inside. It's delicious, he said, his deep voice gentler than usual. Thank you, both of you. He glanced at Lila. Your daughter's quite the baker, Lila replied, smiling. Sophie, still wearing her paper crown, munched happily. The vast apartment, once so cold, now buzzed with chatter, clinking spoons, and carefree laughter. David sat down, silent, simply watching. He didn't need to say much. Deep inside, he felt a wall begin to crack. Because of Lila's presence, his home finally had back what it had been missing all along, the warmth of family. That afternoon, the sky opened with a sudden downpour, raindrops spattering the apartment windows like handfuls of glass beads scattered across the sky. Lila picked Sophie up from school and immediately noticed something was off. The little girl was unusually quiet. The moment Lila held her hand, she felt the heat radiating from it. How do you feel, sweetie? Lila crouched down, pressing the back of her hand to Sophie's forehead. Sophie frowned, her eyes glassy. I feel tired, like an elephant is sitting on my head. Lila squeezed her hand. Let's go home right away. Back at the apartment, Lila peeled off her raincoat, set down Sophie's backpack, and grabbed the thermometer. The number appeared quickly, 102.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Sophie's cheeks flushed, her eyes watery. Lila's chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady. Lie down for a bit. I'll get some warm water. She called David first. I picked Sophie up. She has a fever over 102. I've got her lying down with warm water. Can you come home early? The line was silent for half a second before David answered, tension in his tone. I'll be there right away. I'll call her pediatrician. Okay, I'll keep a warm compress on her. Lila dampened a soft cloth with warm water, wrung it out gently and laid it across Sophie's forehead, tucking another beneath her neck to absorb sweat. Breathe deep, she whispered, like blowing soap bubbles. Sophie followed, her tiny breaths growing steadier. Lila set a cup beside her, coaxing small sips. Just a little at a time. Sophie scrunched her nose but obeyed. In the kitchen, Lila boiled more water, her eyes catching the house rules taped to the fridge beside a pediatrician's contact list David had pinned there. Somehow the organization soothed her. This was a home prepared for days when things went wrong. The door opened just as Lila changed the compress again. David stepped in, rain still dripping from his coat, his eyes fixed on his daughter. Sophie? Daddy, Sophie whispered, lifting her arms weakly. He sat at the edge of the bed, brushing her damp hair back. The doctor said to monitor her temperature, fluids, and warm compresses. If it spikes or she worsens, please call back immediately. They said she can take fever medicine, but he hesitated, glancing at Lila. I'm afraid of giving too much or not enough. Let me check the label, Lila said. She took the bottle from the cabinet, reading the directions carefully, cross-checking with Sophie's weight in the medical notes. We'll stick to the label dose with water and compresses. I'll set alarms to monitor, and we won't push food yet. David nodded, but his fingers trembled slightly as he twisted the cap. He'd never been good in moments like this. His late wife had always been the calm one, while he handled the calls and paperwork. Every time Sophie got sick, memories rushed back like a cold draft through a crack in the door. Lila measured the medicine and mixed it with a spoonful of apple juice. All right, princess. 1, 2, done. She praised softly as Sophie swallowed it, rubbing her back in gentle circles. Rain tapped steadily against the glass. The clock ticked, each second stretching thin. David pulled a chair close, never taking his eyes off Sophie's flushed face. Lila sat opposite, changing compresses and recording temperatures every half hour on her phone. Each time Sophie whimpered, she wiped her neck, changed her shirt, and tucked the blanket just right. Do you need anything? David asked, voice rough. Maybe another pitcher of warm water, Lila smiled wearily. And just the desk lamp. Softer light will help her sleep. David fumbled with switches until he found the right glow. He brought the pitcher, watching Lila's steady hands. She wasn't panicking, wasn't dramatic, wasn't asking for credit. She simply moved through each step as if she had a quiet plan written in her head for nights like this. Back then, he murmured, then faltered. Lila looked up, waiting. Back then, whenever Sophie was sick, Emily, his late wife's name slipped out. She used to sing. I remember the tune, but not the words. He gave a strained laugh. Pretty pathetic. Lila didn't pry. She just nodded. Let's try a story. I'll read, you hold her hand. David clasped Sophie's tiny burning hand while Lila opened a worn copy of Goodnight Moon. Her voice was soft, even, like the rain outside. Good night, room. Good night, moon. Sophie's lips moved faintly with familiar words. Lila added playful tones to the funny lines, slowing down at the soothing ones. By the end, Sophie's eyelids were heavy, drifting closed. We'll let her rest, Lila whispered. Check again in half an hour. They stayed there, one on each side of the bed. Rain blurred the city lights into a watercolor beyond the window. David leaned back, watching Lila in the amber glow. She silenced her phone, setting alarms only on her watch so the vibration wouldn't wake Sophie. Each time she measured, changed compresses, and logged the numbers for the patient consistently. Where did you learn all this? David asked quietly, almost shyly. From doing it, Lila smiled. Kids are like soap bubbles. Press too hard and they pop. So you go gently, steady. David chuckled, the first laugh of the night. That's a good metaphor. The hours stretched taut. At the next check, the fever had dipped. Lila sighed in relief, resting a hand lightly on Sophie's. Better. Keep her sleeping and hydrated. Near midnight, Sophie stirred. Daddy, her voice thin as thread. I'm here. David bent close, kissing her temple. What do you need? I dreamed I was at the beach, but the water was too hot. Because you're my little sun, Layla whispered, and the sun needs rest so it can shine tomorrow. Sophie managed a faint smile before drifting off again. David looked at Lila, his eyes warmer now. Thank you. It's nothing, she shook her head. I'm here because I care about her. When I was little and had fevers, my mom always used compresses. It made me less scared. The word mom shifted the air. David's lips parted. For a moment, he felt the emptiness that had haunted this home, the endless nights of silence, the extra chair at the table, the family photos gathering dust. I thought silence was safe, he admitted softly. Turns out, it's just another kind of pain. Lila didn't answer. She poured more water, set the jug by the bed, and pulled the blanket up. Somehow the room warmed by a degree. By 1 a.m., Sophie's fever had dropped further. Sweat dried on her brow, her breath even. Lila changed her shirt, swapped damp sheets for fresh ones. David helped without needing direction. She cradled Sophie's head. He slid the shirt on. She tucked the blanket, and he placed the teddy bear in her arms. A rhythm between them, wordless and natural. I'll make you some tea, David said suddenly, realizing his companion through this long night also needed care. Chamomile. That would be wonderful, Lila smiled, stretching her stiff shoulders. When he returned with 2 mugs, they sat by the window, far enough not to disturb Sophie, close enough to hear her breathing. I always thought, I don't know what to do, David admitted. When she gets sick, it's like someone switches off all the lights in my head. You turned one on tonight, Lila said gently, watching the rain thin outside. You sat here and held her hand. Sometimes that's the right thing. David stayed quiet. Being there. 2 simple words. He had spent years learning that distance didn't protect anyone. It only made them drift apart faster. The alarm buzzed softly again. Lila checked the thermometer. 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. She showed him the screen, eyes bright. It's down. He exhaled like a swimmer breaking the surface. Thank God. Thank you, Sophie, too, for being so strong. Lila smiled, pressing a warm hand over the child's without waking her. The night trickled on. Near 3 a.m., Lila pulled a throw blanket over herself on the armchair, ready to doze. David shook his head. You sleep. I'll stay. You should sleep, she countered gently. You've got work tomorrow. I'm used to nights like this. They went back and forth, like old friends sharing a familiar tug-of-war. In the end, she curled sideways on the chair while he leaned back opposite. Neither fully asleep, half listening, half drifting, always tuned to Sophie's soft breaths. By dawn, the rain had cleared, the windows turning silver gray. Sophie stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Daddy, I want pancakes." Lila shot up like a spring, then laughed when she saw David do the same. Their eyes met, embarrassed, as though caught sharing the same secret wish. "Pancakes, sure," Lila whispered. "Tiny ones, but only after water." "And only if the princess's fever is gone," David said sternly, though his eyes smiled. Sophie nodded like she understood the rules. She sipped water obediently, the thermometer showing calmer numbers. Both adults breathed out in unison a single, deep, grateful breath. In the kitchen, Lila mixed a small batch of batter, shaping awkward little hearts on the pan. David hovered nearby, setting plates, pouring syrup, and turning the radio to a low volume. Morning music drifted like mist. "Thank you," he said again as the plate of pancakes landed on the table this time, his voice steady. "I should be the one thanking you," Lila replied, watching Sophie bite into the first heart-shaped pancake. "For letting me be here. I like being here." David didn't answer right away. He looked at his daughter, then around his apartment, which was once a museum of silence, now filled with the smell of pancakes, the scrape of spoons, a warm mug on the table, and faint flower prints on the counter. Perhaps this was all it took to make something feel like home. That morning, as sunlight threaded through the clouds, the three of them sat a little closer. No one said it aloud, but they all knew. After the long night, trust had shifted. A fragile thread now connected them, woven from warm water, measured doses, bedtime stories, and a plate of steaming, heart-shaped pancakes. Saturday morning sunlight poured over the neighborhood, turning windows golden like honey. Sophie woke unusually early, her hair a messy halo, clutching her teddy bear as she darted out of her room, eyes sparkling. "Daddy, Miss Lila, let's go to the park today. I want ice cream, and the carousel too." Lila, mid-pour with the coffee pot, burst out laughing. "Since when has our little princess been making plans?" "I dreamed it last night," Sophie declared solemnly, her high-pitched voice carrying. "In the dream, the three of us ate ice cream and took pictures. It was so fun." David folded his newspaper, a slight frown on his brow. He wasn't one to rearrange his schedule. Weekends were usually crammed with emails and virtual meetings. But looking at his daughter hugging her teddy, her big eyes glistening as if ready to spill tears if denied something in his wall, cracked. He glanced at Lila, who was watching Sophie with gentle patience. "All right," David said at last, his voice caught between reluctant and soft. "Just today." Sophie squealed, threw her arms around his neck, then raced over to hug Lila too. "Yay! Both Daddy and Miss Lila are coming." The park was packed for the weekend. Music from the rides floated through the air, mingling with children's laughter and the buttery scent of popcorn. Sophie skipped ahead, holding her ticket aloft like a tiny flag. "Come on, Miss Lila," she called, her voice ringing above the crowd. Lila followed smiling, then glanced at David. "She's a bundle of energy." "Always," David said, but his eyes lingered longer than usual on his daughter's radiant face. Maybe even he was surprised Sophie hadn't looked this happy since her mother was gone. First stop, the ice cream stand. Sophie insisted on the biggest cone with rainbow sprinkles. Lila ordered a small vanilla cup. David was going to pass, but Sophie pleaded, "Daddy, you have to eat too, or we won't look like a real family." David froze. Family. The word rang out bright as a bell. He glanced at Lila, catching her shy, warm smile. Somehow he found himself nodding and ordered a chocolate cone. The three of them sat on a park bench, sun on their shoulders, breeze in their hair. Sophie giggled with ice cream smeared at the corners of her mouth, holding her cone out for Lila's phone camera. "Take a picture, Miss Lila. Quick, click." In the frame, Sophie sat between them, all three smiling. A simple photo, but warmer than either adult expected. Next came the wooden roller coaster. Sophie was determined to ride. "Are you sure?" Lila asked nervously. "It looks so tall." "I'm big now," Sophie announced with conviction. David bought 3 tickets. The cars clattered along the tracks, wind rushing in their faces, wheels screeching against wood. Sophie screamed and laughed, gripping both her father's and Lila's hands. Her hair whipped around, her laughter ringing through the car. When the ride screeched to a halt, Sophie's cheeks were flushed, eyes glowing. "Again! I love roller coasters," she shouted. Lila laughed so hard her stomach still fluttered. David looked at them, and for the first time in a long while, he felt something inside lighten, like he had set down a weight he didn't realize he carried. By noon, they bought pizza slices and sprawled on the grass. Sophie lay flat, arms stretched wide, breathing heavily but smiling in bliss. "This is the best day of my life." Lila dabbed Sophie's forehead with a tissue, murmuring, "Little princess, drink water too, or you'll get thirsty." David sat beside them in silence, watching. The moment was so ordinary, so simple, yet priceless to him. He remembered all the times he'd taken Sophie out just to tick a box, his mind still tethered to work. He had never simply sat still to listen to her laugh and watch sunlight weave through her hair. Later, as they passed the inflatable playground, Sophie dashed ahead. Suddenly, Lila stumbled on a loose stone, teetering backward. David caught her hand just in time. The unexpected pull brought them closer than either expected, their breaths mingling in the narrow space. Their eyes met. For a fleeting moment that stretched long, Lila didn't see the distant, cold CEO. She saw a man who reached out at the right moment. And in David's eyes, Lila wasn't just the babysitter. She was the woman who brought laughter back to his daughter and into his once quiet home. "You okay?" David asked, his voice low, different. "Yes, I'm fine," Lila stammered, her heart pounding. She pulled her hand back, but the warmth lingered. Sophie ran over, wide-eyed. "Miss Lila, Daddy's like a superhero. He saved you." Both adults laughed, but neither denied it. As the day waned, they stopped by the lake, where Sophie begged for a heart-shaped balloon. She clutched the string, twirling and singing as she skipped in circles. Then she stopped abruptly, turned, and declared at the top of her lungs, "Daddy, Miss Lila, we're a family." The bright words carried across the park, drawing curious glances. David froze. Lila blushed, but Sophie's innocent smile melted her embarrassment into tenderness. David turned toward Lila. Amid the noise of children and carnival music, their eyes locked. A quiet truth rose between them. Something had shifted. Neither of them wanted to push it away anymore. That night, Sophie dozed on Lila's shoulder, still clutching the balloon string. David unlocked the apartment door, gently taking his daughter into his arms. Lila lay Sophie in bed, pulled up the blanket. The girl mumbled in her sleep, "Family." They stood in silence. David looked at his daughter, then at Lila. The soft glow of the nightlight framed them. No words were spoken, but both knew. The invisible thread between them had tightened another knot. From that day on, they were no longer strangers bound by chance. Late in the weekend, David received a call from Margaret, his late wife's mother. Her voice was as stern as ever. "David, Sophie needs a proper woman by her side. You should bring her to dinner so we can know what you intend to do." David paused for a few seconds, then agreed. Margaret's house sat in the suburbs, with its white picket fence and neatly trimmed rose garden. But the moment Lila stepped inside, she felt a chill beneath the polished welcome. Family photos lined the walls. David's late wife smiling radiantly on her wedding day. Baby Sophie cradled in her mother's arms. The dining table stretched long beneath lace runners, a golden chandelier shining down on Margaret's austere face. Beside her sat Clara, the late wife's younger sister, sharp-tongued and often biting. Several aunts and uncles filled the seats too, their curious eyes darting to Lila. "So, this is the nanny?" Clara said, stretching the word nanny like an insult. Lila nodded lightly, forcing a polite smile. "Yes, I'm Lila. I take care of Sophie after school." Clara raised her brows, eyes flicking to Lila's worn shoes. "Well, you look the part, but Sophie needs a mother, not a girl hired by the hour." The air stiffened. David turned his head slightly, eyes cold. "Clara, that's enough." But Margaret cut in, her tone slow and heavy. "We're not being unreasonable. David, your wife hasn't been gone long, and now you let your daughter cling to a poor babysitter?" What will people think? And what about the reputation of this family? The word poor fell like a stone into the quiet, rippling through the room. Heat rushed to Lila's face. Beneath the table, her hands clenched until they shook. She wanted to speak up, but her throat locked. She knew to them she was nothing. No pedigree, no status, just a temporary job and a half-formed dream. David pressed his palm against the table, voice dropping low. Sophie needs love, not reputation, and she's happy. That doesn't mean this girl deserves to be Sophie's mother, Clara snapped, her eyes burning with disdain. Lila lowered her head, her chest tightening. Maybe she should step away. Sophie couldn't remain a reason for these people to sneer forever. On the drive back, Sophie dozed in the back seat, clutching her teddy bear. Only the sound of the wind filled the car. I'm sorry, David said suddenly. Lila startled. Sorry for what? For bringing you there. You didn't deserve to hear that. She gave a brittle smile, turning to the window. It's fine. They're not wrong. I'm just an outsider. I don't want to cause trouble for you or Sophie. Her eyes flicked briefly to the sleeping girl, and her heart twisted. She knew she'd already grown attached, but she also knew the distance between her world and David's was a wall too high to climb. David's grip tightened on the wheel. A storm churned inside him, anger at the cruelty of those words, frustration at his own helplessness. They were Sophie's blood, her grandmother and her aunts. He couldn't cut them off completely, but another truth gnawed at him. The image of Lila sitting quietly at that table, swallowing her pride, her eyes shadowed with hurt. It had carved pain into his own chest. That night, once Sophie was tucked in, David stepped onto the balcony. The city sprawled below, lights scattered like restless stars. His mother-in-law's words echoed sharply in his mind. The family's reputation. He'd built his life on responsibility, always choosing image over emotion. But since Lila entered their lives, everything shifted. His once sterile home rang with laughter again. Sophie slept better and smiled more. And he felt lighter, as if breathing had become easier. David closed his eyes, exhaling. Two voices battled inside. Protect the family name. Don't bring shame to her side of the family. Don't lose the one person who brought joy back to your daughter and to you. He knew the wall wouldn't come down overnight, but once a heart leans, nothing can stop it from beating to a new rhythm. Meanwhile, Lila lay awake, replaying those piercing glances, those cold words at the dinner table. Silent tears slipped down her cheeks. Perhaps she truly didn't belong in their world. Maybe she was only meant to be a passing chapter in Sophie's life. Her heart trembled. She told herself to keep her distance. But then Sophie's innocent voice echoed in her memory. We're a family. And just like that, Lila realized one simple truth. Sometimes one child's call was enough to make her want to stay, no matter how high the wall. Soul Stories fam, if you're watching on another channel, come home to us at Soul Stories, where tens of thousands of listeners and sharers come together. Wednesday afternoon was cooler after the night's rain. Lila picked Sophie up from school and noticed the girl hugging a thick sketchbook tightly to her chest, her eyes sparkling as if she were hiding a secret. Miss Lila, today I want to draw, Sophie whispered, as though afraid someone else might overhear. A big one, big enough to stick on the fridge. All right, Lila laughed. Today we'll open our own art studio at home. Back at the apartment, Lila cleared the table, spread out large white paper from the art drawer, and set out crayons, markers, stickers, and glue. Sophie happily arranged them in rainbow order. David had texted that he'd be home earlier than usual, around 7. Lila felt her heart skip. She wasn't sure if it was anticipation or nerves. So what should we draw? Lila asked, placing a cup of water nearby for brushes, though she knew Sophie preferred crayons. Our house, Sophie replied instantly, her face serious, like she'd been given a national mission. Our family. The word family landed lightly, but it made Lila's chest flutter. She pulled her chair closer, smiling. If we're drawing a family, we should start with a heart, right? Sophie nodded eagerly and drew a huge red heart in the center. Then she began sketching stick figures, round heads, stick arms, and legs. This is me, she said, coloring her brown hair with pigtails. This is Daddy, she added, drawing a tall figure with black hair. She paused, looked up at Lila, then carefully added a third figure. And this is you. Lila's hand froze. She watched Sophie give Miss Lila a blue dress and a little bow in her hair. Above them, the girl wrote slowly, letter by letter, Family. Should I put a sticker here? Sophie held up an ice cream cone sticker. Because princesses don't just eat salad, she whispered, making Lila laugh. Put it here, Lila pointed, so everyone remembers the ice cream we had at the park. The picture grew. Blue sky, a smiling sun, a heart-shaped balloon. Each detail carried a memory, the roller coaster, the park bench, the picnic pizza. Sophie shaded orange rays around the word family like sunlight. Then suddenly she leaned close, her tongue poking out in concentration, and scribbled under Miss Lila 2 tiny letters. Mom? Lila's breath caught. Sophie looked up, her big eyes wide and innocent. Miss Lila, can you be my mom? The room seemed to freeze as if someone had hit pause. Lila opened her mouth, then closed it. Her cheeks burned, her heart pounding loud enough she feared Sophie could hear it. Why do you ask that? Lila managed softly, nervously smoothing the paper's edge. Because I want a family, Sophie answered simply. Daddy, me, and you. I know Mommy is in heaven, she pointed upward, but if I could have another Mommy here on earth, it would be the best. Lila swallowed hard. She wanted to hug the girl tight right then, but she knew she had to breathe slowly, choose words carefully, not promise something adults weren't ready to keep. Sweetheart, Lila knelt to meet Sophie's eyes. I love you very much. Do you know that? Of course, Sophie said firmly, as if it were obvious. You make heart-shaped pancakes for me. Lila laughed, eyes stinging. Yes, heart-shaped pancakes. I'll always do everything with all my heart. As for being a mom, families come in many forms. Some families consist of just a dad and a child. Some are just a mom and a child. Some have grandparents, aunts, and uncles. And sometimes there's someone very special. No matter what they're called, the most important thing is love. Sophie thought for a moment, then nodded wisely. Then I choose the family with someone special, and her name is Lila. Lila laughed through her tears. All right, I'll take the title of someone special. Just then the door clicked open. David returned as promised. He hung his coat and walked into the kitchen, then stopped short at the sight of the oversized drawing on the table. What are you two making? Sophie leapt up, clutching the paper. Daddy, look! Family. David took the drawing, his eyes running over the wobbly stick figures, so bright and clumsy with love. He saw himself tall in the middle, Sophie at his side, and Lila too. Under her, in small black letters, Mom? Lila flushed scarlet. David noticed the word, his gaze lingering like he'd touched a cold draft, then set the drawing down carefully. It's beautiful, he said, his voice deep but gentler than usual. You drew me so tall? He raised his hand over his head, making Sophie giggle. You're even taller, she said, then tilted her head, suddenly serious. Daddy, can Miss Lila be my mom? If time had slowed earlier, it would have stopped completely now. David glanced at Lila. Her face was burning red. For a second, all his layers of image, propriety, and responsibility slipped away. He drew a long breath. Sweetheart, he said, crouching beside Sophie, resting a hand on her back. That's a very big question. Big like the roller coaster? Sophie asked, wide-eyed. Yes, just that big, he smiled faintly. You know, Mommy will always be in our hearts, and Miss Lila is someone very special to you, and to Daddy too. He looked at Lila again, this time without dodging. But with big things, grown-ups need time to think carefully to make sure it's safe for you. Sophie pouted. I just want family. She consoled herself by adding a heart sticker between the three of them. David wrapped his arms around her, kissing the top of her head. Lila stood by, her heart aching and warm all at once. She heard something hidden in his words. To Daddy too. A truth he hadn't spoken out loud, but that rang clear. All right, Lila said, smoothing Sophie's back. So what's our family dinner tonight? Spaghetti? Spaghetti, Sophie shouted, forgetting the heavy question as only children can. I'll sprinkle the cheese. Deal, David said, unfastening his watch. I'll boil the pasta. Lila, you make the sauce? Sure, she nodded. Just three people cooking small things together, but somehow it felt unmistakably like a family. Steam rose from the spaghetti bowls. Sophie scattered cheese with gusto, getting it all over her nose. Both adults reached for a napkin at the same time, their fingers brushing against each other. They laughed softly, but the glance they shared buzzed with something unspoken. After dinner, Sophie carried her family drawing around the apartment, searching for the perfect spot. The fridge, she decided, so we'll see it every morning. Lila helped her smooth it flat, pressing the corners. David stood behind them, watching the bold letters Family. A strange mix of fear and hope rose in his chest. Fear because he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Hope because at least now he was facing what he wanted to protect. Later, Sophie curled into bed, hugging her teddy bear. Tell me a story, Miss Lila, she pleaded. All right. Lila sat at the edge of the bed and opened Goodnight Moon. David leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, listening. Her voice was gentle, steady, laying down quiet bricks in the night. Sophie drifted off at the last page, lips mumbling, "Good-night noises everywhere." "Good night, sweetheart," David whispered, pulling the blanket higher. "You're Daddy's heart." "And part of the family," Sophie murmured in sleep. The door closed softly. The hallway glowed faintly with warm light. Lila and David returned to the kitchen, cleaning up dishes side by side. Their hands brushed against each other again over the same plate. Lila pulled back quickly, clutching the towel like a lifeline. "Earlier," David began, then hesitated, rare for him. "Sophie's question may have put you in a hard spot." "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize," Lila said, shaking her head. "Kids ask directly. And I didn't want to lie." "Neither did I," David replied, his gaze locking onto hers. 1 second. 2. Neither looked away. I know you're important to Sophie. And to me. I don't know when it started. Maybe it was at the park, or maybe that night she had a fever. But now I know for sure." Lila's heart pounded against her ribs. "Me too," she whispered. "But I'm scared. Scared of making things messy. I don't want Sophie hurt by people's words. And she gave a strained smile. "I'm afraid of being erased from that picture." David shook his head slowly. "No one erases you. However, I agree we should take it slowly and carefully for Sophie. No rushing, no labels before we're ready. Just keep doing what we did tonight. Eat together, read together, listen to her, and listen to ourselves." Lila exhaled as if a weight had been lifted. "I can do slow. I don't want to make promises too soon. But if one day she asks again, I want to be able to answer honestly without fear." "I want that too," David said. Silence stretched gently, not heavy. On the fridge, the family drawing seemed to glow a little brighter. "I'll finish these dishes," Lila said softly. "Tomorrow I'll pick Sophie up, same as usual." "All right," David nodded. "Tomorrow, if you're free after school, maybe we could stop at the park?" "No roller coasters, just a walk. I'd like another picture." Lila smiled, dimples deepening. "Okay." She grabbed her bag and headed to the door. David followed, standing just one breath away. They looked at each other. No hugs, no hand-holding. Just two adults respecting boundaries, yet unable to hide the warmth in their eyes. "Good night, Lila," David said. "Good night," she replied, then almost too quiet for him to hear, "Good night, family." The door closed softly. In the elevator, Lila pulled out her phone, staring at the photo she'd snapped of the family drawing on the fridge. On the other side of that door, David lingered, looking at the same drawing on the fridge. After a long moment, he found a magnet and pressed it firmly over the corner, straightening it like he was afraid it might fall. On Saturday afternoon, the Blake apartment carried the faint scent of banana bread, fresh from the oven. Sophie sat at the table, busy coloring the three-person family picture she had started the day before. David was tied up in his office with an online meeting, and the door was closed. The doorbell rang. Lila wiped her hands and hurried to answer. Standing before her was Margaret, David's former mother-in-law. The woman wore a light gray knit coat, her silver hair neatly pinned back, her eyes cold despite the polite smile on her lips. "Hello," she said evenly. "I came to visit my granddaughter." "Of course, please come in." Lila stepped aside. Sophie squealed, dropping her crayon and running into her grandmother's arms. "Grandma!" Margaret hugged the child, smoothing her hair. "My sweet girl, you're so pretty these days. You've grown so fast." Her eyes flicked toward Lila, and the corner of her mouth tightened faintly. A ripple of unease passed through Lila, but she forced a small smile. "I'll tidy up the kitchen a bit. Please enjoy your time together." She retreated to the kitchen, though every word still carried clearly to her ears. "Grandma, look at this picture," Sophie said proudly, holding out the paper. "Me, Daddy, and Miss Lila." Margaret took it, her expression tightening slightly. It's a nice drawing, but Sophie, do you still remember your mother?" "Of course," Sophie nodded, her eyes clear and earnest. "I think of her every day. I even talk to her before I go to sleep." "That's good." Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice into a steady rhythm. "But you know, your mother in heaven would be very sad if she saw you calling someone else Mom. Your mother is the only one." Sophie froze, clutching her teddy bear tight. "But I didn't forget, Mommy. I just like Miss Lila. She makes pancakes, tells stories, teaches me to draw." Margaret squeezed her granddaughter's shoulder, whispering, "Not everyone is sincere, Sophie. Some people only get close because they want to lean on your father. You must be careful." "Really?" Sophie's voice shrank to a whisper. "Yes, remember what I told you." In the kitchen, Lila's hands gripped the edge of the counter until her knuckles turned white. Every word sliced into her chest like a blade. She wanted to step out, to shield Sophie from those seeds of doubt, but reason held her back. This was family. She was just an outsider. A short while later, Margaret rose, adjusting her coat. "Well then, I'll go. Don't forget what I said." She kissed Sophie's forehead, then cast Lila a final icy glance before leaving. The door closed, leaving a heavy silence behind. Sophie clutched her teddy, saying nothing. Lila crouched beside her and whispered, "My love, you don't need to worry. I'm here just to love you." But Sophie only gave a small nod, her once clear eyes now clouded with a fragile doubt. That night after dinner, Lila read Sophie a story and stepped outside so David could say goodnight. Standing in the hallway, goodnight moon still in her hands, she overheard the quiet exchange inside. "Daddy." "Yes, sweetheart." "Daddy, if I call Miss Lila Mom, will Mommy be sad?" Silence. Lila froze, her heart plunging to the floor. Inside, David sat stunned beside his daughter, blindsided by how deeply the afternoon's whispers had already rooted in Sophie's mind. "Sweetheart," his voice faltered. He pulled her close against his chest. "Your mother will always love you, watching over you from heaven. And Miss Lila, she's someone very special who loves you with all her heart. But about calling her Mom, Daddy? Daddy doesn't know how to answer in the right way." His voice broke. Sophie nestled her head into his shoulder, whispering, "I just don't want Mommy to be sad. But I also want a family." David kissed her hair, shutting his eyes, saying nothing more. In the hallway, Lila heard every word. Her heart shattered. She knew David never meant to hurt his little girl, yet his hesitation revealed an undeniable truth. She was the cause of this conflict. She turned away, hot tears sliding down her cheeks. Late that night, back in her tiny apartment, Lila sat motionless at her folding table beside a small cactus. Her phone chimed with a new email. She opened it. Interview invitation. Little Stars Child Development Center. Her whole body trembled. This was her dream, the very place she'd longed for, nurturing children through art and creativity, the path she'd been working toward. She let out a broken laugh. Her dream was within reach, yet her heart felt unbearably heavy. Sophie's trembling voice haunted her. "If I call Miss Lila Mom, will Mommy be sad?" And David's helplessness, unable to answer clearly, carved itself into her memory. Lila whispered to herself, as if confessing aloud, "Maybe I should leave. Not because I've stopped caring, but because I care too much. Because I love her too much to see her torn apart. Because I love him too much to see him trapped between two walls. Outside the window, the city lights glittered against the night. Inside the small room, a young woman sat before the email of her dreams, tears slipping down her face. The storm hadn't come from the sky, but from her heart, and it was pulling her away from the home that had once overflowed with laughter. On Monday morning, the kitchen table was still cluttered with craft supplies and picture books that hadn't been put back on the shelf. But Lila wasn't there. David sat in his chair, staring at the spot where she always tied Sophie's hair before school. Empty. "Where's Miss Lila, Daddy?" Sophie asked, clutching her teddy bear. David froze, forcing his voice to stay even. She's busy. Daddy will take you to school today." "Just today?" Sophie frowned. David nodded, but inside he knew the answer wasn't that simple. The house slipped back into its familiar silence. No more childlike laughter echoing down the hallways. No more sweet scent of Lila's weekend baking. No more craft messes cleaned up to the sound of her soft humming. Sophie changed noticeably. She smiled less, spoke less, and pushed food around her plate instead of eating. One night, David carried her dinner tray into her room and found her sitting on the floor, paper scattered everywhere. Tear-stained scribbles filled the pages, drawings of family, with Lila's place crossed out in heavy strokes. "My love, you need to eat something," David said gently, kneeling down. Sophie shook her head, hugging her teddy tighter. "I don't want to. Without Miss Lila, food doesn't taste good. Daddy, bring her back." David gripped his daughter's shoulders, but no words came. In the nights that followed, he stayed up late in his office. The computer glowed with endless emails and spreadsheets, but the letters blurred before his tired eyes. Work went on. Money kept flowing in, but all he felt inside was emptiness. He tried to bury himself in his routine, meetings with partners, signing contracts, reading reports. Yet even multi-million-dollar deals couldn't stir his interest anymore. The mansion without Sophie's laughter, or rather without Lila, suddenly felt too vast, too hollow. Once, while reviewing a contract, his eyes landed on a photo on his desk. Sophie grinning from ear to ear, sandwiched between him and Lila, all three eating ice cream at the park. Sophie had folded the edges to prevent them from carrying it around to show everyone. The sunlight, the smiles, the warmth, they all leapt alive from the picture. David dropped his head back against the chair, his chest aching. Money could buy everything except this. It couldn't buy his daughter's pure laughter, nor the warmth Lila had brought into their lives. He realized he had lived like a machine for years, chasing wealth and guarding reputation. But since Lila arrived, Sophie laughed more, and he himself felt his heart beat differently. Now with her gone, everything was empty again, and he couldn't bear it a second time. One night, heading to the kitchen for water, David paused at the fridge. Sophie's drawing was still there. 3 people holding hands under a red sun. But Mom? Beneath Lila's figure had been scribbled over in thick black crayon, the paper smudged from Sophie's tears. He stood still, fingertips brushing the blurred marks. In his mind, Sophie's voice echoed, "Daddy, bring her back." The warm light fell across his face, tense yet resolute. For the first time, David saw clearly. He couldn't let this go. He couldn't let his in-laws or anyone else decide his and Sophie's happiness for them. Lila had brought laughter and love into this house, and he would not lose her. The next morning, David walked Sophie to school. Before she ran into class, he crouched down to tie her shoelaces. "Sweetheart," he said, looking straight into her sad eyes, "I promise you we'll laugh again. I'll bring Miss Lila back." Sophie froze, then threw her arms around his neck. "Really?" "Really," David said firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, but a smile broke through. David stood, watching his daughter run toward the classroom. Inside him, his resolve was set in stone. He could lose them all, but Lila and Sophie's smile, he would fight for at any cost. Thank you for being part of Soul Stories. If you're listening on another channel, come back to the official home so you can continue our love journeys together with the Soul Stories family. The city was pounded with heavy rain that night. Sheets of water pounded against tin roofs, and headlights rippled across the slick streets. David stood in front of the worn-down apartment building where Lila rented. his dark suit drenched, hair plastered to his forehead. He had driven across half the city, abandoning meetings and unfinished contracts. For the first time in years, he was letting his heart lead instead of his schedule. The door of apartment 3B stayed shut, dim yellow light spilling faintly through the crack. David lifted his hand and knocked 3 times. No answer. He knocked again, harder, his voice hoarse against the rain. "Lila, open the door. I know you're in there." Inside the small room, Lila sat hunched at the table. A suitcase lay open, clothes folded neatly inside, alongside documents for her upcoming interview at the Children's Center. She heard the knock, her heart hammering. She knew it was him, but she didn't dare. "Lila," David's voice cut through the storm, steady yet trembling. "I don't need someone perfect. I need you, the one who brought laughter back to my family." Lila broke down, tears falling as the rain roared outside. She rose, hand trembling on the doorknob. Part of her urged her to open it. Another part trembled with memories of Margaret's cold stare, of the fear that Sophie would bear more pressure. The door swung open. David stood there, shirt clinging to him, chest heaving, but his eyes ablaze. No longer the cold CEO, just a man risking everything to hold on to what mattered most. Lila's voice cracked. "You shouldn't be here. Your family will never accept me. And Sophie." "Sophie needs you," David cut her off, his voice firm. "So do I. Do you think I haven't noticed?" "She lost her laughter when her mother died. It only came back when you walked in. I let you go once. I won't let it happen again." Lila shook her head, tears streaming. "But I'm scared. Scared she'll be hurt. I don't want Sophie to feel like she has to choose between me and her mom in heaven. I don't want you caught between me and your entire family." David stepped closer, leaving only a breath of space between them. He placed his hands gently on her shoulders, his voice low but pleading. "Listen to me. I don't need anyone's approval. I need the truth in my heart, and my heart chooses you, Lila. Not because you're perfect, but because you're you. The one who stayed when I panicked over Sophie's fever. The one who made bunny-shaped pancakes, told bedtime stories, and taught me how to laugh again. Don't walk away. I need you. Sophie needs you." Lila trembled, her vision blurred with tears. She wanted to believe, but fear gnawed at her. What if everything fell apart again? What if Sophie got hurt one more time? And then a small voice rang out, bright and trembling. "Miss Lila!" Sophie came running into the hallway, wrapping her arms tightly around Lila's waist from behind. She wore pajamas, her little slippers soaked through with water. Her innocent face tilted upward, eyes brimming with tears. "Don't leave me!" Lila's heart shattered. She sank to her knees, pulling Sophie into her arms. Tears mingled with the rain, but this time they melted into something sweet. The little girl clung to her as if afraid she'd vanish. "I never want to leave you," Lila whispered, sobbing. David bent down, wrapping his arms around them both. The three of them held each other as the rain thundered down. No distant promises were needed. This moment was already an answer. Lila nodded, whispering through her tears. "Okay, I'll stay. For her and for you." David closed his eyes, holding them tighter. Inside his chest, years of weight fell away. The cold walls he had built around himself finally crumbled in the storm that night. The Blake estate glowed on Monday morning. But this time, it wasn't the sparkle of crystal chandeliers. It was the warmth that spread through every corner. Leela set breakfast with Sophie, their laughter ringing brightly through the kitchen. David leaned against the doorway, arms folded, a smile tugging at his lips before he even realized. No one called Lila the nanny anymore. She sat right at the table, beside Sophie, like a true member of the family. "More honey on the pancakes, Mommy Lila," Sophie chirped, saying it all in one breath, as though that name had always belonged. Lila flushed, glancing at David, but he only nodded gently, his eyes glowing with joy. A week later, David brought Lila with him to a major charity event hosted by his corporation. The press swarmed the lobby, camera flashes exploding nonstop. The moment David appeared, hand in hand with Lila, the room stirred. The famously cold CEO, who had always kept his distance from women, now smiled radiantly beside a modest woman in a simple pale blue dress. Sophie skipped ahead with a basket of flowers, sometimes turning back to grab both their hands and pull them closer together. One reporter whispered, "That's the first time I've seen him truly smile." Flashes captured it all. Three people hand in hand, a perfect little family. No explanations were needed. The image said everything David couldn't. The wedding came not long after, not in a grand cathedral or a five-star hotel, but in a small garden blooming with hydrangeas. Guests were few, consisting only of close friends and family. Lila wore a simple white dress, her hair pinned with tiny blossoms. David, in a navy suit, never took his eyes off his bride. Sophie dashed around in a pink princess dress, scattering petals down the aisle, her clear voice ringing through the garden. "I have a dad and a mom now." Her joyful cry brought a smile to every guest. David squeezed Lila's hand and whispered in her ear, "This is the best deal of my life." Midway through the celebration, a familiar figure approached. Margaret, David's former mother-in-law, stood watching, her gaze layered with emotion. Silence fell as everyone waited. She walked slowly toward Lila, studying her for a long moment before letting out a quiet sigh. "I was wrong to think you only wanted to lean on David. But I see it now. You truly love Sophie, and because of you, she laughs again like she used to. Thank you, and I'm sorry." Lila froze, then answered softly, "I never wanted to replace anyone. I just wanted Sophie to be happy." Margaret nodded, eyes glistening. Her apology closed the storm of the past. A year later, David and Lila cut the ribbon at the opening of Little Star Center, a place for children to be nurtured through art and creativity, the very dream Lila had always carried. Sophie stood at their side, holding a microphone. "Welcome, everyone, to the home of smiles." The crowd burst into laughter and applause. David bent down to kiss his daughter's forehead, while Lila squeezed his hand tight. Together, they had built not only a new family, but also a home for many other children. That afternoon, after the ceremony, the three sat on the porch as a breeze carried the scent of hydrangeas. Sophie rested her head on her mother's lap, whispering, "Today I'm so happy, because my family is real." Lila hugged her close, eyes brimming. David wrapped his arms around them both, his voice deep and steady. "And it always will be, sweetheart." In the glow of sunset, laughter rang out pure and bright. The once cold mansion was now filled with warmth. A new family had been built not through perfection, but through love. Happiness at last was complete.